Welcome to another Bluetooth speaker Onshape tutorial. In this tutorial we are going to create the cube speaker case. This is perhaps slightly more difficult than the cylinder speaker, but it's still very easy to do. I've already loaded the software. You can see I'm already in my Bluetooth speakers folder. So the next thing to do is just to create the document. So left click on create, left click on document, and I'm simply going to type in title of cube speaker, click OK, and that will take me into the design area. So if you followed the last tutorial for the cylinder speaker, we drew that one starting on the front work plane. For this one, we're going to start on the top work plane. So I'm going to move the mouse over, so I'm just highlighting the top work plane. I'm going to right click and I'm going to select new sketch. And as before, I could right click and select view normal to the sketch plane, or I can press the N key for normal so that I'm viewing normal to the work plane on the keyboard. I'm going to use a center rectangle tool on this sketch. So I'm going to go up to the drawing tools, sketch tools. I've currently got corner rectangle selected, so click on the little arrow, come down to center point rectangle. And again, I'm going to start this from the origin. So left click on the origin, just drag the shape out, and left click again to create a rectangle. Now the shape of our speaker casing is actually a cube, so we'd be drawing a square, but it doesn't matter if you don't get that really accurate, because of course we're going to now dimension that. So left click on the dimension tool, and I'll left click on one face, just come away a little bit, and I'm going to change that to 100 millimeters. Now I could do exactly the same on one of the sides, repeat the process, dimension it to 100 millimeters. But actually what I'm going to use is a constraint. So across the top of my screen you can see some constraints. Now if you're on a smaller screen, you might just see one of the constraints with an arrow by it, and you have to click on the arrow to come down and select. I'm going to use the equal constraint. So I'm going to click on the equal constraint. I'm going to click on the line that I've dimensioned, and I'm going to click on the line on the 90 degrees to it, perpendicular to it, so one of the side lines. And I'm basically saying now that this line is the same length as that line. Why have I done that? Well, it saved me having to put a dimension in, but say I was modeling this and I was trying different sizes. If later on I decided I wanted a smaller version of the speaker or a bigger version of the speaker, I can go back to this sketch and just change one dimension. Well, let's do that. Let's turn the equals constraint off. If I double click on the dimension, I can change that to 150 and hit return, and you'll see that both sides have changed. Because this side is the same length as the top part of the square, it has automatically changed. Okay, let's change that back. So double click, type in 100 and go back. So I've got my outline done. The same as I did for the cylinder tutorial, I now want to create a wall thickness inside here, and I'm going to do it in exactly the same way. So if you followed that tutorial, you'll know what's coming next. I'm going to use Mr. Greedy, the offset tool. I'm going to left click to select it, and then I'm going to click on the outside or the top line. You can see it's gone outside, doesn't matter. I'm going to actually go around and I'm going to click all four sides of the square. I'm then going to hover over the arrow, hold the left mouse button down and drag it inside. Doesn't matter how far I go. Let go, press enter. I'm going to change that dimension to 6 millimeters. Press enter again, and I've now got my offset. So I've now on the top work plane drawn my basic shape. I want to extrude this now the height of the walls of the cube. So this is going to be 88 millimeters. So I'm going to left click on the extrude icon, and I'm going to change the distance to 88. And as before, I want this to be symmetric. So I'm going to left click in the symmetric box just to put a tick in there. So we've gone 44 millimeters up from the top plane and 44 millimeters down from the top plane. And I'm just going to left click the tick to confirm. So you can see I've now got what we would call a square tube, and this is the basic shape of our cube speaker. Okay, let's add some ends to it then. Let's do a top end first of all. So I'm going to hover the mouse so that I'm between the inside and the outside lines or edges of our square tube. They've both gone orange. So I'm selecting that top face. I'm going to right click, left click on new sketch, and then press the N key to view normal to it. And again, I could create a square. I could convert these edges. In this instance, let's use a different tool to do it, just to show a bit of variety. So left click on the rectangle, pick the corner rectangle, and this time I'm going to hover over this bottom left corner, see how it wants to snap to the corner. And I'm just going to then move over to the top right hand corner, and again it wants to snap to that top corner, left click with it snapped, and I've drawn the shape. So this is going to be our lid to our cube box. So I'm now going to extrude that 6 millimeters. So left click on extrude, change the distance to 6, press enter, and you can see it's giving us a preview. It's gone upwards, which is what we want to do. If I left click, it will go downwards. If I change left click on the arrows here, but we do want it to go up, so I'm going to change it back again. And now I'm just going to tick to confirm that. Now I also want to add a bottom on. Let's use the mirror tool like we did with the cylinder if you followed that tutorial. So left click on the mirror feature, change it from a part mirror to a feature mirror. The feature to mirror is going to be extrude 2, and the mirror plane, left click to select the mirror plane box, and that's going to be the top work plane. So let's left click on that. If I spin that around, you can see it's the top work plane. It's put a preview in, it's mirrored it correctly, left click, and there we have our basic cube. Now what we don't have are any openings for our speakers yet. So let's right click and then left click on isometric so we can see our cube in isometric. What I want to do is I want to cut a hole in here for our speaker to go. So hover over that face until the edges of that face are highlighted in orange, right click, left click on new sketch on the menu that appears, and then I'm going to press N for normal. So I'm now going to draw a circle on here that will be the opening for the speaker, and because again we thought about where the origin is in the middle of that face, so I can use the center point circle tool, hover over the middle to select the origin, left click, come out, left click again to create the circle, use the dimension tool, left click on the outline of the circle, left click in space, and that's going to be 67 millimeters. So change it to 67 on the keyboard, hit enter, and we've got the circle drawn for the shape that we want for our speaker hole. Now this is a hollow box on the inside, remember, and we want a hole on opposite faces, so we can actually cut this hole all the way through. So we're going to use the extrude tool, and you can see it previews it's wanting to extrude 25 millimeters outwards as if we're creating a lug, almost like a piece of Lego. We don't want that. It's selected add, it's trying to guess what we want to do. We don't want it to add, we want it to remove. So I'm going to left click on remove. So it's then said, okay, well, we'll remove going inwards. But although I know the depth of this cube, I know it's 100 millimeters, I could change that to 100. What if I couldn't remember? What if I wasn't very good at maths? What have I forgotten? Let's change the blind end state to through all. So come down to the bottom, left click on through all, and as I move around now you can see that it's actually cut through the whole part. I was using the right mouse button held down to be able to wiggle that around. So left click on the tick, go back to isometric. Well, you can't see both holes in isometric, but if we change that around you can see that that goes all the way through. Let's do the same as we did with the cylinder. Just go back to isometric and let's create a drawing of this so that we could print it off and do some test renders of different materials. So click on the little plus sign bottom left of our screen, left click on create drawing, Again, we're going to use a custom template, ISO for International Standards Organization, leave it on A4. We won't worry about changing first angle because we're going to put it in isometric. Click OK. It'll create the drawing for us and then ask us what we want to put in. We've only got a part studio, we've only got the one part, so left click on that. It wants to try and create an orthographic drawing, so let's change that from front to isometric. Trying to do it half scale. Let's change the scale to 1:1. That should just about fit in our page. If we draw it over here, left click, there's an isometric drawing of our cube. We can then print this out and do some renders to make it look like we've covered it in different materials. Thanks for watching. That ends the tutorial on creating the basic cube case of the Bluetooth speaker. Make sure you check out the next video where we'll look at something a little bit more complicated.